Hey you guys, welcome back to Rocket City Yardstead. So as you can see behind me, we're here in the garden and I thought we could just take a little walk through the garden this morning because I've been out here doing quite a bit of work. Yesterday was the coolest day of the week we were going to have. And so I was out here for about 3.5 hours, just kind of doing some housekeeping stuff. I finally got those cherry tomatoes tied up that I had showed you at one point that were just laying everywhere. I got the walkways weed whacked. And so it's just looking the best it has in quite a while. So I thought you guys might like to have a peek. And then after that, I need to do my first big harvest of peppers this year. Specifically, I am picking my Anaheim peppers because this afternoon I need to make some chili rellenos. So I'm going to do chili rellenos in two different ways. The first way is just going to be for dinner tonight, and that is going to be in the air fryer, which I have never done, but I've been looking at various recipes, and I think it's going to be really good. Different recipes, I'm kind of going to be pulling from a couple of different recipes to get just what I'm looking for. And then the other thing is chili relleno casserole. So if you've ever made chili rellenos in the traditional way, it's actually pretty time and labor intensive, and especially if you're making it for a lot of people. Well, we're going to be seeing my brother's family next week, and that means there will be 7 of us. And so the chili relleno casserole, when you're feeding a crowd of people, in my opinion, it's just the way to go because you still get all of those delicious flavors, but without the big time commitment. Let's go take a walk through the garden and I'll show you what I've been up to, and then we'll get to picking those peppers. Here we can see all of this pink twine here. And I got my cherry tomatoes all tied up. None of them are laying on the ground anymore. Over on this side, you can see I've done the same thing. And it's really important that I got them up because here you can see this tomato was starting to get pretty diseased. And so my plan here is to actually prune this diseased stuff off as best I can, but also do a hydrogen peroxide spray on the plant to help stop any blight that's on there from spreading farther. I also wanted to show you, if you guys have been with me in previous videos, you might remember I showed you a plant that was supposed to be a super sweet 100. Well, this is one of those tomatoes. So clearly it's not a small little cherry tomato. They're not very big, but they taste good. We've pulled a few, and I made up a batch of salsa last night. So I mentioned that I weed whacked my walkways as well, and they just look so much better. It honestly is crazy to me that it never occurred to me that that was an option. But the truth is, there is landscape fabric under here as well as mulch, and I just felt like I should be weeding it. But the reality is we have these really pervasive grass weeds that blow in and have just taken over. And I was watching Sage and Stone Homestead, and she talked about weed whacking in a very similar situation. I thought, well, why am I not doing that? So I did, and I'm really glad that I did. If you guys watched the video where I talked about installing shade cloths in the garden to protect it from the heat, then you will know that about half of my sweet potato plants died. They just were too young, not established enough to deal with this level of heat because sweet potatoes love heat. So my solution for that, and I don't know if it's going to be a good one or not, but I will absolutely bring you along and we'll see how it does, is that on my back porch where we store our sweet potatoes, I have lots of these little almost fingerling-like size sweet potatoes that have sweet potato slips still attached to the tuber. And so I planted, I think, 22 of these yesterday. I stuck the whole sweet potato in, got the slips down partway underground so that they can put roots on. So I'm hoping that that is going to be the solution to putting my sweet potatoes out when we're already in the 90s. So I'm going to give you guys a look at what that looks like. They're very small right now. We'll see what they look like in a couple of weeks. Just to show you the difference, these couple of plants right here are ones that managed to survive the heat. But then we go back and you can see how little those leaves are. So this is where I planted one of those little tubers, and it's got slips on it. There's another one right there. And so we'll come back here in a couple of weeks and see if these have grown. I did want to show you guys my big tomatoes, the slicing kinds. I haven't really brought you over to show you these, and that's largely because they're just having a rough year. I think between the lack of rain and the heat, they're just not growing as quickly. They're probably a good foot to 2 feet shorter than my tomatoes normally are at this point, but also their blossoms are falling off. Now, right here, you can see I have this kale. I really expected it to have bolted by now, but it still tastes good and hasn't bolted, and so I hadn't pulled it. But my tomato plants that I put in here next to them, they are definitely stunted being right here next to this kale. And so one of the things I need to do this week is pull these kale plants out and process it. I think I am going to freeze dry it and put it in jars so that we can put it in soups for the winter. But of my big tomatoes, they're not really slicers, but they are bigger tomatoes. They're not cherries. My Amish pastes here are the only ones that have actually set any fruit. So I'm hoping adding that extra shade cloth is going to help, but time will tell. Right after I told you guys that my tomatoes weren't producing anything, they went and made a liar of me, because walking back down the row, I spotted a couple of tomatoes. Right in here, there are a couple of pineapple tomatoes. I've never grown these before, but they sound like they're going to be delicious, and they're beautiful when they're ripe. You guys, I just picked a pepper that was caught in a curlicue of another plant, and I Googled a picture of the leaves of that plant, and I think it's a purple passion flower, which I've been wanting passion flowers for a long time. Not necessarily growing in a hole with one of my pepper plants, but I am going to show you what this looks like. And if you happen to know for sure if it is passion flower, would you let me know? And also if it is going to be okay to leave it in this hole, or if I need to try and dig it out and transplant it. Okay, so it's growing from down here somewhere, but here are the leaves. And then there is a curlicue where it's connected to one of my pepper plants. So if you know if this is really a passion flower, let me know. All right, you guys, so here is my harvest for the day. I've got chives and cilantro to garnish our chili rellenos tonight. There's a little bit of oregano in the basket for seasoning up the chili rellenos. 1 cucumber, but otherwise, this whole basket is Anaheim chili peppers. Specifically, they're called a Big Jim, but they're ready to go in the house. And then this afternoon, we can get to making chili rellenos. Y'all, I knew I had plenty of peppers to make the 2 dishes I wanted to make, but I didn't really realize just how many I have. I got in the house and unloaded them from my bucket and counted, and I have 21 chili peppers to make these dishes with. So I might even have some chili peppers left over to put away and just freeze roasted chili peppers. We'll have to see once we make our casserole. But the first thing I need to do here is something that I frequently forget to do, is poke some holes in my peppers. I got a fork out to do this, but I actually think just like a paring knife would be better. In the past, when I've forgotten, my peppers actually will burst in the oven. So we just want to make a few little holes in the skin so there's somewhere for the air to go. I have a cookie sheet with foil on it that I'm putting my peppers on. The reason I have the foil on there is because, number one, it makes cleanup easier, but also one of the ways to help get the skin off is to let your peppers steam for a little while after you have blistered the skins. And so instead of putting them in another dish and covering it, I'll just wrap my peppers up in the foil and let it steam in the foil. And so again, it just makes it a little bit easier. So I'm just going to go through and poke some holes in all of these peppers. Now that there's holes poked in all of our peppers, I am going to put this tray under the broiler in the oven, and we will just keep an eye on these peppers and watch for them to broil and their skin to start blistering, and then I'll pull them out and flip them over and let them broil again on the other side. While the chili peppers are under the broiler, I'm going to get the next part of our chili relleno casserole started, which is going to be a nice ground beef layer. Not every chili relleno casserole recipe has a meat in it. A lot of them are just cheese, but I find this stretches it farther. So, and it tastes delicious. But so I'm going to add some seasonings to our ground beef. This is some garlic powder, some cumin, some smoked paprika. This would be, if you like spicy food, this would be a great place to use maybe some smoked chipotle, but we're keeping this family friendly. And then some chili powder. Oh, and I can't forget, I also have chopped up the oregano that I picked from the garden today. And finally, some salt. And then I'm just going to use my meat tool here to break this meat up. This may take a little while because this was frozen and I had to defrost it, and the middle is still a little bit frozen. But we'll just get this all nice and browned up, and then it will be ready to go into our casserole. Our chilies are ready to come out of the oven and be flipped. Here you can see they're nice and charred. Some of them a little less than others, but for the most part, they're charred to a stage where they're going to peel nicely. So I'm going to get these flipped over, and then they'll go back in the oven to char on the other side. You can see here our ground beef is all nice and cooked up, and our chili peppers are all nice and charred. So I am going to get those wrapped up in the foil and let them steam for maybe 10-15 minutes. While our peppers are steaming, I'm going to start grating cheese for the chili relleno casserole. So this recipe calls for about 8 ounces of cheddar cheese and about a pound of jack cheese. I know it's a lot of cheese. This is not a meal that we would eat regularly, but it's definitely a nice treat in the summer while the peppers are coming in. I did want to address, I am using Anaheim style peppers, and I've seen plenty of recipes that do that. But traditionally, especially if you're having chili rellenos out to eat, you're more likely to see poblano peppers when you're ordering chili rellenos. They're both delicious. They both work just fine. I have poblanos in my garden, but they are just not ready yet, but the Anaheims are. And this is a really nice meal I can make for my family ahead of time, so that when we are actually together, we can spend time together and not be stuck in the kitchen. So I'm just going to get the rest of the cheese all shredded up, and then it'll be about time to assemble our chili relleno casserole. I am just working on peeling the peppers here. Inevitably, you're going to find spots where it's a little harder to get the skin off, and it just takes a little bit more work. But I usually just try and find a little spot where you can see that the skin is detached from the flesh, and I'll pinch that up and start peeling the pepper there. I did want to mention, I've seen at the grocery store before where you can actually buy cans of whole roasted and peeled poblano peppers. And so if you don't have a garden, you don't want to go through this trouble, or it's just, the dead of winter and you don't have peppers available, that would be a fantastic way to make this recipe, and it would make it so much quicker and easier, and just a great option. So I'm just going to keep working on peeling these peppers, and we'll come back once I'm all done and move on to the next step. The chili peppers are all peeled, and some of them didn't peel perfectly. They have little holes in them and stuff. And so those are the ones we'll use for the chili relleno casserole. But I set aside I think 4 chili peppers so that I can use them for the air fryer chili rellenos. Those peeled perfectly. But so now it is time to de-seed and take the tops off of the peppers. So I like to find a weak spot in the pepper where it's maybe already broken a little bit, and then just open the pepper up and get it all nice and laid out flat. And then I scoop the seeds out and take the top off. The seeds are really where a whole lot of the heat is in the pepper. And I don't mind if we have a few of those left over, but we do want to get most of them out. So I'm just going to go through and do this for all of these peppers. And then once we're done with that, I will come back and we'll move on to the next step. You're going to notice in this clip that my voice and the video don't match up. My microphone malfunctioned, but I wanted to tell you what exactly it is I'm doing here. So I'm making the eggy batter that goes over the top of the chili relleno casserole. So obviously you can see here I'm cracking eggs into this bowl. The first ingredient that goes in is 5 eggs that we crack and mix up. And so once that's done, we will add the other ingredients. The next thing we're going to add is flour. Now, if you can use all-purpose flour, that is perfectly fine. That's what the recipe calls for. I need a gluten-free option, and so I use my homemade oat flour. I find this to be a really economical way to make flour. It doesn't work in every application, but in something like this, it works really well. And it's just a little way to save money over the expensive one-to-one mixes and things like that. So here you can see that I'm whisking the flour into the eggs. I just wanted to get everything nice and incorporated before moving on to the other ingredients. Here you can see me reaching for the milk that I have pre-measured out. This is a 1.5 cups of unsweetened almond milk. I use almond milk in this recipe as a substitution for the whole milk that the recipe calls for. It might seem a little bit odd since we are putting cheese into the recipe, but I don't tolerate milk, but because cheese is fermented and those bacteria that make cheese do a lot of eating on the lactose and stuff, it's really common for a lot of people to be able to still eat cheese when they can't have straight milk. So that's what we're doing here. And once we're done getting it all incorporated, we're going to add in some salt and some pepper. And then this batter is going to be all ready for us to assemble our casserole. All of our individual components of our chili relleno casserole are ready now. And so the first thing I need to do is spray the pan with some avocado spray. You could use whatever kind of oil spray you want. That's just what I happen to have on hand. And then we're going to add the seasoned ground beef into the bottom of our casserole. We'll get this all spread out in the pan into an even layer, and then we'll move on to layering in the other ingredients. Now that we have our beef all spread out in an even layer, I'm just going to start layering in the chili peppers. Now, this is one of those things where recipes will tell you about how many you need, but really you just kind of have to use common sense here and look at how big the peppers are. Smaller peppers are obviously going to require more. If you happen to have monster peppers coming out of your garden or from the grocery store, and it's going to require a lot less. Here you can see it's taking quite a few peppers because of the kind of peppers I'm using, and also some of them are clearly smaller than others. But you know, when I do this, it sort of makes me think of almost like a Mexican lasagna. We're definitely layering this like you would a lasagna. You know, you have your beef, and then here, these peppers, they're a little bit like your noodle layer. And so we're just getting an even distribution in the pan. Now that the peppers are on, we're going to add in about half of the jack cheese. The key here is really just that you want to get it evenly distributed on top of your casserole here. You want to make sure everybody gets a nice bite of every ingredient when you slice this up into pieces. Once we've got all of the cheese on, then it's going to be time to add another layer of peppers. So you can see what I mean when I say it's kind of like making lasagna. It's all about the layers here. I do want to say you can use whatever kind of cheese you want in this. I tend to stick with more traditional cheeses for something like this, like the Monterey Jack and the cheddar, but you could use a pepper jack. That would be delicious, especially if you happen to have peppers that aren't as spicy. Or really, I'm trying to think what other kind of cheeses, but just whatever cheese you prefer. Maybe some of the Mexican cheeses like Oaxaca or Chihuahua would be really good in here. But once we get these peppers all spread out on top, then we are going to add the rest of our cheese. So the rest of the jack cheese and the cheddar cheese I have shredded up. I did use a more mild cheddar than a sharp cheddar because mild cheddar melts better, doesn't get quite as stringy. So just keep that in mind when you're picking what cheeses you're going to put on top of your chili relleno casserole. The final thing we need to do here is pour our eggy batter over the top. I do this pretty slowly because I just want to get it as evenly distributed as possible. This is sort of like the glue that holds the casserole all together. I'm giving it a little swirl to mix the flour in better. I'm just giving it a little shake to try and get it all evenly distributed. And now it's ready to put in the oven. So this is going to bake at 350 degrees for about 45 minutes. And obviously you'll want to check it, maybe 5-10 minutes ahead of time, depending on how your oven heats. I just pulled the chili relleno casserole out of the oven. It looks delicious. It smells wonderful. Our family is really going to enjoy this next week. Now, if you were going to serve this fresh, I would wait maybe just 5 to 10 minutes and let it sit, cool, and set up a little bit. And then you can slice it up and serve it to your family. Because I'm saving this for next week, I am going to let it cool completely. And then I'm going to put saran wrap and foil on it and put it in the freezer until next week. And then I'll pull it out a day or two before we want to eat it, and then we can reheat it in the oven. So I'm going to bring you guys down, give you a little bit closer look at what it looks like. Here you go, guys, a close-up of our chili relleno casserole. It looks so yummy and cheesy and delicious. All right, you guys, so we are moving on to the air fryer chili rellenos. These are going to be a little bit different. Got to be a little bit more careful in how we handle these peppers. So the first thing I'm going to do is I have a paring knife here, and I am gently putting a slit in this pepper. I'm trying to be very careful to only go through the top pepper here and not through the bottom layer of it. So now that I've got that slit open, I do want to try and get some of the seeds out, just like with the chili relleno casserole. But it's a bit more of a delicate process here. You can see I have some shredded cheese here. I will tell you, because I had miscalculated earlier on how much cheese I needed for the chili relleno casserole, I shredded all of my jack cheese. That is not how I would have done this if I had had my measurements right. So learn from me. Make sure you measure well. But I would have done strips of cheese in here instead of shredded cheese because I just think it would be easier to handle. So I want to get cheese in there, but I don't want them to be too full. So we're going to see if we can get it closed up. And if I need to pull some of the cheese back out, that'll be fine. But I think that's going to be good. So there is our first pepper for our air fryer chili rellenos. So I have 3 more of these to do. And once I'm done with those, we can move on to breading them. Okay, you guys, so I have my peppers all cleaned out and the cheese stuffed in them. So the next thing we need to do is get our dredge ingredients. So I'm using oat flour again. I am using gluten-free breadcrumbs that I just got, honestly, at Walmart. They are called 4C crumbs, gluten-free panko plain, but they have really good ingredients. All that's in these is rice flour, raisin juice concentrate, honey, and salt. We're going to get some of those in a bowl. And then our third bowl is going to be an egg with a little bit of water. And we will get that all mixed up. I'm also going to season this pretty simply. We're just going to go with some salt, garlic powder, pepper, and smoked paprika in every layer of this breading that we're doing. I found with the breadcrumbs that they tend to let the seasoning drop to the bottom, and I still season it, but it just makes it more important to season the other elements so that you're getting some seasoning. Oh. I should have put an apron on today, you guys. I've got flour on my shirt. So before I go mixing that egg up, I'm going to use the fork to stir our seasonings into our flour and our breadcrumbs. And then we'll get our egg all mixed up. I'm looking at these chili rellenos and they don't particularly want to stay closed, so I'm a little bit nervous about how this is going to work. But we will find out together. Before I get my hands all dirty, I want to go ahead and spray the liner of my air fryer. And now we're going to start breading our chili relleno. I think they're going to be largely open. Maybe the cheese will just be melted inside of an open pepper, which will be fine. I imagine it'll still taste really good. It's just a little bit different than what I was thinking it would be. But the only way to know is to see it through to the end and then give it a taste test. So we're going to take this first one and put it down here in the air fryer. I'm going to rinse my hands off and try and get you all at a better angle to see what I'm doing. Okay, so here we go with chili relleno number 2. Just going to set it down here in the flour. And the peppers are pretty fragile, I would say. So instead of moving them around in the flour, I'm just using my fingers to try and get them well coated. And then we're going to set them down in the egg. And I just tried to roll this a little bit to get it good and coated. But I'm having to be very careful because we have that shredded cheese inside of them. Ooh. And then finally, move them over to the breadcrumbs. The breadcrumbs are really the only element that I tried to get onto the top as well as the sides. But now we're just going to pick it up very gently and set it there in the air fryer. And here you can see the first 2 down in the air fryer. So 2 more to go. Here are our chili rellenos all breaded up and in the air fryer. I am going to spray these with some avocado oil, and then we are going to take them over to the air fryer. So these are going into the air fryer at 400 degrees for 10 minutes. And we'll see how they are when they come out. The air fryer has just turned off, so we're gonna get our first look at these chili rellenos. Oh, you know what? I think they look pretty good. Let's see if I can turn them so you can see. I'm gonna get these plated up and we'll give them a taste test. Okay, you guys, so both kinds of chili rellenos are done, and I'm gonna give you a peek at both of them together. So here we've got the casserole, and then over here we have the air fryer ones. Okay, you guys, so we're gonna give this a taste test. Because it's brand new to me and it's brand new to my mom, I've got her out here to also give it a taste test. And she has a microphone on, so you'll actually hear her honest review, even though she doesn't want to be on the camera. I have my food up on a box so you can see me and the food at the same time. But here we go.
Yummy.
It's good. It's crunchy, which you don't normally expect from a chili relleno, but that's not a bad thing. It's just different. I don't know if I would make these again, although they are good, but we love the chili relleno casserole, and it's a lot easier, to be perfectly frank. But if you think it looks good, you should give it a try at least once, because you never know, it might be your favorite. So if you decide you want to try either of these, and you do, let me know what you think. I hope you enjoy them, especially the casserole. That is a tried and true favorite for us. But thank you for hanging out with me today. I'm glad you were here. I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.